I am a doctor. At my uncle's birthday dinner, my cousin's husband said, "Everyone knows you had connections." I asked him where he heard that. He looked at my mother. I am a 41-year-old male. I have been a doctor for 14 years, and this is the story of how my own mother spent 2 decades telling our entire extended family that I had bought my way through medical school, and how I found out at a dinner table surrounded by people who all believed it. So, growing up, we did not have money, and I want to be specific about that, because it is relevant to everything that comes after. We were the family that bought school clothes in August on layaway and ate a lot of rice and beans toward the end of the month, and my mom worked the overnight shift at a packaging facility for most of my childhood so that my brother and I had what we needed, and I loved her for that, and I still do. But loving someone and understanding them fully are two different things, and it took me until I was 38 years old to fully understand my mother. I was a good student from the beginning, not in a performative way, but in a genuinely hungry way. I loved learning, and I was fast, and I had teachers who noticed and pushed me, and by the time I was applying to college, I had a list of scholarships and a GPA that opened doors, and I got into a good university on a full academic scholarship. And then I got into medical school, and I did it the same way I had done everything, by working harder than I thought I could, and then working harder still. My mom was proud, I know she was. She came to my white coat ceremony, and she cried and she held my face in her hands afterward and said she couldn't believe her son was going to be a doctor, and I held on to that moment for years because there weren't many moments like it between us. She was not an expressive woman, and warmth from her was something you noticed when it came because it came rarely. I finished my residency at 30, got a position at a hospital in a city about 4 hours from where I grew up, built my career, made a life, and came home for holidays and family events the way you do when your family is complicated but still yours. And everything seemed fine on the surface. There were tensions here and there, but nothing I thought was significant. Then about 3 years ago, I came home for my uncle's 60th birthday, a big family dinner, about 20 people, cousins and their spouses and family friends who had known us all for decades. And I was sitting next to my cousin's husband, Marcus, who I had always gotten along with. And we were talking about his son, who was thinking about medicine, and he said something that I almost let pass because I thought I had misheard him. He said, "Well, you obviously had connections that helped you get in, so it's harder for people who don't have that." I looked at him and I asked him what he meant, and he looked slightly uncomfortable and said something about how everyone knew that getting into medical school without the right support was almost impossible, and that my family's connections had smoothed the path for me. And I asked him again, very calmly, to explain exactly what connections he was referring to, because I had grown up on layaway school clothes and rice and beans at the end of the month, and I was not aware of any connections. He got quiet and looked down the table, and I followed his eyes, and my mother was watching us, and something in her face told me everything before anyone said another word. I did not make a scene at the dinner. I finished the evening the way I always finish things that need to be finished, by holding myself together until I was somewhere I could fall apart privately. And I drove to my mother's house afterward, and I sat across from her in her kitchen, and I asked her directly what she had told people about how I had gotten into medical school. She was quiet for a long time, and then she said that people had always asked how someone from our background had managed it, and that she had told them we had known a doctor who had put in a word for me, and I asked her who this doctor was. And she said she had made it up, and that she had just needed an explanation that people would accept, and that it had started as a small thing and gotten away from her. I sat with that for a moment, and I asked her how long, and she said probably since my first year of residency, and I did the math on that quietly in my head, and understood that for over 10 years, my mother had been telling our entire extended family a story that erased everything I had actually done, and replaced it with a connection that did not exist. I asked her why, and what she said next was, "The thing I have spent 3 years trying to understand, and I think I finally do." She said that people from our neighborhood, our family, the world we came from, did not have a framework for what I had done. They had never seen it happen without some kind of outside help. And when it happened to me, they had asked her to explain it, and she had not known how to say that her son had simply outworked everyone around him, because that sounded like she was bragging, and she had not wanted to brag, and so she had given them something else to explain it with. She had not meant to take anything from me. She had been trying to protect herself from being seen as boastful in a community where that was not acceptable. And the thing that she had taken from me in the process was the one thing I had actually earned, which was the acknowledgement that I had done something hard and real without any help from anyone. I told her all of that, and I was not unkind, but I was honest in a way I had never been with her before, and she cried, and I let her cry because this was not a moment to smooth over. I went back the next morning, not to the full group, but I called Marcus and his wife, and 2 of the cousins who had been at the table the night before, and I told them the truth, not defensively, just factually. I told them about the scholarships and the grades and the residency, and I told them there had never been a doctor with connections and that I needed them to know that. Because I had spent 14 years building something real, and I was not willing to let a story stand that made it into something else. Marcus apologized and said he had never questioned it, because it had come from my mother and I understood that, and I told him I appreciated him saying it and we were fine. My mother and I had several more conversations after that, and the relationship has shifted. Not broken, but shifted. She is more careful now, and I think she understood for the first time what the story had cost me and who it had cost me with, and she told some of the other family members the truth herself, which I had not asked her to do, and which I respected her for. I think about the kid who won every scholarship he applied for, and stayed up until 2 in the morning studying biochemistry and matched into a residency program that accepted 12 people out of 400 applicants. And I think about him standing in a room full of people who had been told his story, had an asterisk. And I think the most important thing I did in all of this was refuse to let that asterisk stay. I did not buy my way in, and I did not know anyone, and I did not have a connection, and I did not have a framework either. I just had the work, and the work was always enough, and eventually everyone in my family knew that too.